And welcome back to the Touchline Talk Show. Thank you so much for tuning in. As always, be sure to hit that subscribe button so you don't miss any of the content I put out every single week. It is World Cup final preview time. Our final is set. Spain, England, two teams that have never been to a Women's World Cup final before. One of them is going to win it. Some really interesting storylines here. So it is time to break it all down. Starting with the numbers. Some interesting things I want to point out about this matchup and kind of how these teams have played in the tournament so far. These are all courtesy of FB Ref and StatsBomb, so shout out to FB Ref. Spain leads this tournament with an average expected goal difference of 2.47 per 90 minutes. So, right, per game, 2.47 expected goal difference. England is ninth at 0.78. Expected goals aren't everything, but they do tell a story. Now, that story can be a couple different variations. It can be a story about missed opportunities. It can be a story about dominance, or it can be a story about a team not being good at finishing. And I'm going to get back to that kind of at the end when I talk about the keys to this game in particular. But it is worth pointing this out, that from a balance of play standpoint, a chance creation standpoint, Spain have been far and away the best team in the tournament, and England have not been particularly good. Which matches kind of what you've seen from England, where they haven't been all that convincing most of the time, particularly when Lauren James hasn't been on the field. Speaking of Lauren James is second in this tournament in goals plus assists per 90 minutes at 1.89. And I didn't actually look at the numbers, but I believe that she has the highest goals plus assists per 90 minutes of players who have played a significant number of minutes. I'd have to go double check on that. But the point is that when she's been on the field, she's been terrific. Arguably the best player at this tournament. And England have struggled somewhat without her. Now she's back. And I'm not going to get too much into this yet because it's going to really come back later in this preview. But just to put in perspective how good she's been. Goal contributions per 90 minutes, she is second in the tournament. Third thing, I just kind of found this interesting, so I wanted to throw it out there. These two teams, Spain first, England second, pass completion percentage in this tournament. One of the reasons for that is something I'm going to talk about later, so I'm not going to spoil it here. But that tells you something about the way these teams play and where their strengths are. That's no surprise for Spain. England maybe a little bit more so, but you've got a really good midfield that can really pass the ball. And so the passes are getting completed by both of those teams. I don't have too much in terms of takeaways from that. I just wanted to point it out. Number 4, Spain, first in shot creating actions per 90 minutes, just over 39. Second in goal creating actions per 90 minutes, 3.79. Again, going back to the goal difference thing. Nobody has been better at creating chances in this tournament than Spain. Now, the team ahead of them in goal creating actions, I believe, was Japan, who were just really good at finishing. And were playing ridiculously well until they lost to Sweden in a game that they probably should have won. So outside of that, but from a just creating opportunity standpoint, Spain have been the best team in this tournament. And then finally, you've got 6 players who started the Champions League final for Barcelona playing in this game. You've got Lucy Bronze and Kira Walsh for England, Irene Perez, Latanya Bomati, Salma Periuelo, and Mariona Caldente for Spain. And, Alexia Putellas came off the bench at the very end of the Champions League, if I remember correctly. My point is just, A, these players know each other. Obviously, they all played together at Barcelona this season. And B, for teams that don't have experience in these kind of environments, and England have played in a final, England have been to World Cup semifinals, but also you have the advantage of the home crowd, so it's going to be different in a neutral venue that's thousands of miles away from England. These players do have big time experience, even though they haven't been to the spot in a World Cup. In Spain, in particular, having a foundation of players who have played in Champions League finals really helps. So I just wanted to kind of go back and look at that starting lineup from the Champions League final. Over half of it is theoretically going to play in this game, which is really interesting to me. Then we get to the big question. And my big question here is kind of different than most of the ones that I come up with. It is who gets the tactics in the lineup right. Because both of these teams have had different evolutions throughout this tournament. This is not England at the Euros, who started the same 11 players every single game. This is an England team that switched formations, that then didn't have Kira Walsh, and then didn't have Lauren James, and the two of them have not played in this new 5-3-2 together. There's a lot going on there. And it changes Kira Walsh's responsibilities. It moves who your starting 11 is because you're bringing in an extra center back. And we haven't seen Lauren James work in this system for the most part. So does Lauren James, now that she's eligible to play, come back into the starting lineup? To me, the answer is that she has to. But also the player who took her spot scored a really good goal in the semifinal and has a tendency for coming up with big goals in Ella Toon. What does that formation from Serena Wiegman look like? Look like? Is it going to be the 5-3-2? Are they going to go back? Because part of that was to, compensate for not having Kira Walsh. Really interested in that part of it and whether Lauren James gets her spot back. Then, on the Spain side, 14 different players have started half of these games, 3 or more. You don't see that very often. It's not just that they've rotated a little bit. It's that players have been in and out of the starting lineup. And so Jorge Vilda has some decisions to make here. Does Alexia Putellas start? She had been dropped for a little bit, then she got put back in. Hasn't been particularly impactful. It also just takes one game where, it would never be shocking if she just looks like the best player on the field at any given moment. She could just wake up Sunday and everything looks normal again. Who knows? So what is the 11 that Spain actually go with? Is Putellas in it? How does all of that kind of get put together? And then substitutions as well. These teams both have more than 11 starters. So how do you utilize those players coming off the bench that can be real difference makers? If you're England, you know exactly what you're getting in Spain in terms of philosophy. How does Serena Wiegman deal with that? There are some really interesting tactical and kind of lineup-based questions that, to me, are going to be the thing that determine this game. Is which manager do you come out of this feeling like they got it right? The matchup I'm looking at. Kira Walsh, Aitana Bonmati. Not necessarily that they're always going to be going up against each other, but these might be the best two kind of pure midfielders in the world at this moment in time. I don't need to keep harping on about how important Kira Walsh is to England. Aitana Bonmati has been phenomenal for Spain. She's right there in terms of the best players in the world. And they both do some of the same thing, which is kind of be the creative, and maybe even creative force isn't really accurate for Kira Walsh, because obviously Bonmati is much more involved in actually making goals happen. But they are the heartbeat. They are the foundation of everything in that midfield. And so in a game where you have really good midfielders supporting both of them, in your potentially your Alexia Putellas, your Georgia Stanways, your Lauren Jameses, whoever it's going to be, which of these players really puts their imprint on the game? And I guess the similarity is coming from this idea that, and I know Belmonte scored some goals, but you might not necessarily see the impact on the scoreboard or on the defining plays of the game. But I cannot wait for this matchup, because this is one of my favorite positions in the field to talk about and to watch, specifically Kira Walsh. It's the same, I was talking about this with Sandro Tonali. There's a reason that people are paying premium money for this position now. These number 6, these deep lying playmakers, you can have different variations of it. But the dynamic two-way players that just make everybody else's lives easier and do all the things that you don't notice unless you're looking for them. We've got probably the 2 best in the world at it in this game. They're not the same kind of player. Like I said, Belmonte's, more goals, more assists, some more creativity, more involved in the attack. But they hold a similar place in terms of their importance to these teams for me. And they might just be the best 2 players in the world in the midfield category at this moment in time. So that's the matchup for me. Which of those players are we talking about more by the end of the game? The X Factor, not a particularly difficult decision. It's Samuel Paralluelo. Samuel Paralluelo has completely changed the dynamic of Spain's last 2 games. They might not still be in this tournament if it wasn't for Paralluelo. She has been sensational coming off the bench, which is part of, again, these lineup decisions. She deserves to start, but also what she gives you off the bench. If you can keep it close for 70 minutes, keep it tied. The last 2 games, Paralluelo's come in and more or less decided the game in Spain's favor. So that is the 2 parts to this X Factor for me. One, she has been the X Factor the past 2 games. You see it when she comes in. Everything changes. She is so energetic, so dynamic. She just pops off the screen. And the other part is, can she do it again, and how does she get utilized? Because it's a different situation if you're starting. You're not going to see the same kind of energy for 75, 90 minutes if she's in the starting lineup. I'm a firm believer just in sports in general that your best, and it's a little bit different in soccer because you can't just sub all the time like you can in basketball. But your best lineup doesn't always include your best 11 players. It's about managing for 90 minutes. Honestly, I would probably keep her on the bench and just say, I know you want to start like everybody else. What we need from you is to be on the field when the game's going to get decided in those final 15 minutes in extra time, whatever it might be. You've proven to be the decisive factor in that moment. We want to do that again. So, Samuel Paralluelo, X Factor, definition of X Factor. The way she has performed the past 2 games for Spain. Last section here, England win if. I kept this pretty simple. Lauren James is the same player she was before she got suspended. There's the emotional, mental side of that suspension. The fact that she missed these World Cup games. Her team almost got eliminated with her on the sidelines. The guilt that's associated with the actual incident. Then there's also just getting back into game, up to game speed. And oh, by the way, it's the World Cup final. Welcome back. But she's been so good when she's been on the field. And you have Kira Walsh to take away some of that dynamism from Spain's midfield. Whether that's Belmonte, whether that's Putellas. I just look farther up the field. And if England get the same Lauren James with Alessia Russo and Lauren Hemp, I just have a hard time seeing Spain win this game. Because the goals were a little bit more free flowing when Lauren James was still out there. And I know they did score, you know, 3 against Australia and kind of got some rhythm back offensively after struggling for a while. But it hasn't been all that pretty. I still think though that they are better equipped because, and I talked about this at the Euros too. What Serena Wiegman has done such a good job of is finding the balance between the pragmatism and letting these incredible attackers go. It's something Gareth Southgate has really struggled to figure out. And the balance hasn't been quite as good in this tournament as it was at the Euros. But here they are. It's not about looking pretty. And I just think Lauren James decides this game if she's good to go and looks like the same player she was, which she could have not looked like that player had she continued on in this tournament. She was on a whole nother planet. But if she comes back and she's that player, I only see one winner, and that's England. On the Spain side, Spain win if the attack shows up and they don't make mistakes. And by attack shows up, I mean put the ball in the net and capitalize on your chances. Because for all of the XG and the shot creating actions that I love to talk about, it hasn't been spectacular over these past few games. It's looked difficult at times. And they needed Paralluelo to come in and provide a spark because it was kind of lifeless. That's the first part of this. You can have all the possession in the world you want, all the shots in the world you want. If you don't actually create good chances, if you don't actually break teams down, it doesn't matter. The question is not whether you're dominating play. The question is whether the other team feels uncomfortable. Who, and maybe that's just the ultimate question that needs to get answered. Who feels like the game is being played more on their terms and who is more comfortable with what is happening? Because Spain's men's team has fallen into this trap on multiple occasions. Yeah, the numbers look great. You outshot them 22-2. Did you actually threaten the goal? No, not really. So that's got to, and this Spain team hasn't had one go-to scorer. It's been a team effort through and through. Does somebody rise to the occasion and can they put the ball in the back of the net? The other part of this, I said, don't make mistakes. And this is where I want to point out what has happened to England the last 2 games. Go down against Colombia. And where did that goal come from? Goalkeeper mistake. Lauren Hemp just kind of sticks around, gets her foot in there, and pokes the ball into the net. All of a sudden, it's 1-1. Going into halftime, you feel much better. They come out second half, improved performance, take care of Colombia. Then the semifinal. Get the goal. Great goal from Elatoon. Sam Kerr, even better goal, probably. And all of a sudden, the entire country of Australia is coming down on you. And they believe that the Matildas are about to go take this game over. And where does the goal come from? Ellie Carpenter, Mackenzie Arnold, miscommunication, and there's Lauren Hemp again to put the ball in the net. Now, credit to Lauren Hemp for just not giving up on these plays and making people execute. 2 games in a row, she has come up with massive goals out of nothing. So that's the other key here for me if I'm Spain. Maybe they're just going to beat you because they're better on this day and Lauren James is spectacular, Alicia Ruscio is spectacular, whatever it might be. What I do not want, if I'm Spain, is to beat myself and to gift them a goal. Because that has changed so much these last 2 games. What happens if Lauren Hemp doesn't get her foot on that loose ball against Colombia? What happens if Ellie Carpenter communicates with Mackenzie Arnold and that ball gets cleared out for a corner or something? Who knows? England very well may not be here. And so it's for Spain, it's got to be two different parts to this for me. You can't just sit there and pass the ball around without creating good chances. You got to create good chances and you got to convert on them. And you also have to make sure that if you go ahead, you don't let England right back into the game, because that's the other part of this for Spain. They had a tendency to do that. Now they found a way to come back both times, but that's part of the way story too, is that there have been some very quick goals conceded after taking late leads. England have just found a way to continue to score the goals they need to, and a lot of that has been just putting pressure on opponents who have not dealt with it well. If you're Spain, you've got to be prepared for that, and you've got to just mentally stay engaged and make sure you don't gift England another goal. Because they've been pretty good about not giving up leads and not panicking if they do concede like they did against Australia. And for that reason, I'm going with England. I kind of hinted at this earlier. I just think they are the most complete team in terms of what it takes to win tournaments. Now, I also had them losing to Germany in the quarterfinals or something, so it's not like I'm sitting here saying I told you they were going to be here. But in this matchup in particular, I also didn't think Spain was going to be here. Full credit to those players for sticking together, finding a way to work together with all the tension and all the stuff going on off the field. I just feel more confident in the balance England has when Lauren James is on the field in particular. That you've got dynamic attackers. Her, Russo, Hemp's been chipping in goals. You've got Kira Walsh to mitigate the Bonmatis and Puteases in midfield for Spain. If you go three at the back, that's an extra defender. And I do like what that does for Lucy Bronze and Rachel Daly. I just, top to bottom, I just love the multi-dimensional nature of this England team. And anybody who's listened to me knows how big I am on that when it comes to major tournaments, just tournaments in general. They can play from behind if they need to. They've proven that. They're tough to break down if they go ahead. It took a brilliant effort from Sam Kerr. They also have, players that can come in and make a difference. Ella Toone, Chloe Kelly. They've got the players who can go provide the moment of brilliance and be the best player on the field. Elisa Russo, Kira Walsh. They just check every box. And I know it hasn't been particularly pretty. But I'll take the team that's learned how to win that way over the team that I still just have this mental hurdle with Spain when it comes to major tournaments in this style of play. And maybe that's unfair to lump the women's team in there with the men's team. But we're talking about Barcelona, we're talking about Spain. The philosophy is incredibly similar. They're phenomenal to watch, great players. This should be a really good game. Give me the Lionesses. Maybe we're having a different conversation if Spain is at full strength. But I've just seen too many times where there aren't enough ideas in attack. And I just don't think England are going to beat themselves. That's the other part of this. Somebody has to actually go beat them, and nobody has yet.